KUMC, welcome back to another video. This is a continuation in our what is creating a vision at KUMC, at this church, for this community look like. And we've gone through the last 4 weeks or so, kind of bouncing back in a conversation, some with some members that have spoken into life at KUMC over its history, a little bit about what our present situation is. We've compared that and just kind of put that up against people and other situations across our connection that are doing wonderful things in vision and work for community, work for church. And we're just allowing those stories to live next to each other as we walk through this today. So John, I'm so thankful that you're here to continue that. John, you have been a member at this church for how many years now?
16.
2010. So you came in as we already got into the Forestville address. We had been there for 3 years or so, 2-3 years.
Probably just less than a year.
Less than a year.
Yeah. It was in our neighborhood, relatively speaking. We walked our dog and we saw the church coming up, and that was probably the one thing, or, one of the things that that sort of pushed us to get back into looking at a church, and that was the one we looked at.
Well, and through those 16 years, you and your wife, Anita, have really invested a lot into this community. I mean, not just showing up on one fateful Sunday to give it a try, but continuing to be a regular presence. And you've served on a couple of different committees. So has Anita.
Mm-hmm.
Anita is currently serving on a committee. You're currently serving as the chair of the board right now. So obviously this church means something to you.
Yeah, I think that what drew us in, was getting involved in a couple of smaller group situations. One was the choir. We also got involved with the Disciple One study.
Yeah.
And that was about, it was a pretty big group, about 20, 25 people. Jolene Harris and her husband Rob were the leaders. That was a nice long thing. I mean, I think it was nice that it lasted 9 months, and, we really established some interpersonal relationships with the people that were in that class. And we learned a lot about Christianity in that. I mean, it was a good refresher for us who had been away from the church for a while when we had first gotten married. And so, those two things, and then just meeting people, and, we like this church, that's why, I think a lot of the people who are still with the church now have the same sort of mindset that the church is the people, not the building, and that, you keep coming back because we really like so many of the people that are at KUMC.
Do you remember a time over, say, the first year, 2 years or so, where you felt a transition? I'm no longer a new person here. I'm a committed member. I am here. Maybe even moving yourself to being a part of that invitation to new people that came in.
Two things, I guess. One is when we actually joined the church, formally joined the church. And then once we were in the choir, then that was sort of like, okay, you're now committed.
Yeah.
So
we got you hooked.
So, those two things, I think, were the point where, okay, it took a little bit of time. You feel new for a while, and then, until you start recognizing most people's names. And I think, when you join a group like that, or, it's not only interpersonal connections, but you feel sort of an investment at that point.
Yeah.
And you are, you're actively contributing. And then, we got involved doing some things with the food pantry and some other things. And so, all those things contributed to feeling like, okay, I'm off my probationary status here.
Yeah.
I'm a full member.
There you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now there's work ahead of you.
Yeah.
And so that's when you got to add it onto committees and left for this leadership project or that. That's how it works. Hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
And we're so thankful. The church is better because you guys are here. It really is.
Thank you.
For you and for many that are a part of this community. All right. So while we're talking, I hear on the inside you've got some construction that's going on in the house.
Yes. Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah. We had a leak from our hot water heater, which is in the attic, which, when water goes downhill, it creates some impact. And so we've got repair folks in there fixing our kitchen and our upstairs bathroom. And when we had a bigger flood 15 years ago in our house,
not at the school, at the house,
right,
or not at the
house,
church.
We were displaced basically from the downstairs for about 3 or 4 months, and you get through it.
Wow.
And with our church, I think we're getting through this, probably better than I expected in terms of most people have stayed. We're getting a few new members, which is good, and the core of the church seems solid to me. And people are, it takes some time, obviously, to get adjusted to worshiping in the school, and the work has to take place every Sunday to build it up and tear it down.
Yeah.
But I think people, for the most part, have taken a very good attitude towards it. I think that, we're not losing ground. We want to start gaining more ground than we currently are. But I think that we're in a state where, we've gotten past what I was worried to be the danger point in terms of how I think we're getting through it. And I think that, the core of the church is still in good shape. And I think people are being pretty faithful about that. I think our church, for some time, even before, years back, when we were dealing with the mortgage issues and all the other things, we knew we had to change. Selling the church building, while not something we wanted to do, was necessary. And we came out of that, and we're in with the New Faith Communities, I think we're in this visioning process that hopefully is going to lead us to a blueprint of how to change. And I think most everybody that I've spoken to in the congregation about this agrees, we need to change. We need to change how we're interacting in the community. We need to do some things different. Now, we don't need to necessarily do everything different, because some of the things we're doing are working just fine.
Yes, and they're beautiful.
But I think that in terms of how we're behaving as a church and how we want to present ourselves into the community, how we want to make changes in the community, those things are new and different. And I think, a lot of people are looking at this as exciting.
Yeah.
And perhaps, all the change has been forced upon us with the sale of the church building and whatnot, helps that, that we realize, okay, these things aren't what they used to be.
Yeah.
If we were still in a building and, we meet in Wendell Christian for choir practice, and it's in an older building, and I'm thinking, how would you break out of into a new space, as a church and as a visioning thing, if you were in this old building? It just screams old to me, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Sure.
But we know we're in transition, and this is just one more. The building is part of the change, and one more change that we've got is we need to look out differently. And visioning, this whole visioning process, I think, is going to, push us towards that. And with some coaching from the folks that you've enlisted, I think that we'll get there. And I'm excited about that possibility.
The sun's out, la 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 la, and it feels so good, la 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 la, on the right side, la 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 la, and it feels so good, let's go, la 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 la, living on the bright side, looking for that good life, everything is alright, riding on that golden wave, swimming in the fresh blue, pussy feeling brand new, sun is about to break through.
Some churches decide that they want a vision statement and some values that undergird that. It's important all throughout this process to just be thinking about, I'm here not just to represent what Rachel thinks, or what Rachel and Jeff think, and not just what Nightdale UMC thinks, right? But all those people at the Home Depot and at the park and wherever they are, what they're thinking too, what values would help them feel seen and loved, the things that we talked about.
So when Anita came home and she gave you the vision statement, which is that as a church, our vision is to serve as a heartbeat in the community, so that all feel connected and worthy of love. What was your reaction to that?
It felt like, okay, this is along the lines of how we see ourselves. This is along the lines of what we want to be, and that we are reaching out in the community, and that's that's the area where I think the most significant change needs to take place for us. We just need to find opportunities to do that, and that we'll be looking for that. And so the fact that that was included in the vision statement was important to me.
The start of the Methodist movement is changing communities in amazing and just wonderful ways. So it's part of our DNA.
Right.
And so for us as a church to name that, to claim it, and then to put in the effortful work ahead to make it a reality, that's where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exciting.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Challenging.
Right.
But exciting.
Right. It's like anything else. If everybody can do it, if it's easy, then anybody can do it. Things that are harder, often more valuable,
Yeah.
and you appreciate it more afterwards. And I think that that's what we'll see. We'll have some growing pains, and we'll, not everything we're not gonna strike gold on every item, but that's
right.
Standard stuff. And I think that, I think if we keep to that vision and keep aligned with that, then we will end up successful, because that's what God's calling us to do. And then I think if we're faithful stewards of in God, then and believe what we say we believe in, we'll follow through. And it's just a matter of getting some successes out there, and then we'll build upon those.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, friends, I don't need to add anything else to this. You've heard everything that you need to hear. I'm so thankful for John, for you being a part of this conversation, but also this church and this process of transformation.
Thank you.
I'm thankful and I'm hopeful that each of us can continue to see that progression of life-giving and excitement and joy in this work for us as a church. And I hope and I pray that all of us find individual growth along this journey as well. So that's what we're holding on to for each and every one of you. We'll ask that you continue to be a part of this conversation and sharing these videos with other people within and outside the church. Let people outside the church know what we're doing, how we're working together. The other part of this is we expect that over the years that we'll continue to grow in both body and in spirit. And it requires each and every person to be a part of that. So we'll go ahead and put the invitation out to be a part of this transformation, this change as we move forward, as we continue to learn and practice what it looks like to serve as a heartbeat in the community. And so thank you. I think we have one more video next week that we'll share with you in part of our conversation right before Easter, before we finish up this Lenten season. So we're praying for you as you continue down this Lenten journey, as we prepare our hearts for the resurrection of Easter, that celebration. We may have a few words that are important to share about that theological framework and how we think about this process of visioning here at KUMC. So come back and be a part of that conversation next week. All right. We'll see you then.